George began his therapy dog training and work. He writes a blog, and in one of those blogs, he states, "I always had in mind the idea of working with my dog and with her, reaching out to people in need, hospital patients, children with schooling issues, anyone who might be helped by a dog visit, a dog interaction." So for over 10 years now, George and his therapy dogs have visited hospitals, senior living facilities, schools, and even done hospice work in homes. George is a local director of Therapy Dogs of Rockland. It's a subsidiary of the national organization called Intermountain Therapy Dogs. He is a R.E.A.D trainer, reading education assistance dog, trainer and volunteer at several libraries in Rockland County. And he teaches courses in dog therapy. Some of his pupils are here with us today at the Portchester Dog Obedience School in White Plains. I just want to add a personal note. I heard about George and his therapy training before I ever met him, because two friends of mine, Susan and Maggie, Susan has 2 legs and Maggie has 4, have been in training and are now active over in Rockland County, working in schools with children who have reading problems and in a nursing home with elderly Dominican nuns, and she absolutely loves it, and so does Maggie. So with that, I introduce George, our friend and favorite 2-legged dog trainer.
Thank you. This is Paco. And I think we'll talk about Paco first and how he and I came together. And I'm going to put him up here where he can cheese Theo and be comfortable. I have, as mentioned, been doing therapy dog work for over 10 years. I started with a beautiful, sweet Labrador retriever named Dixie, who weighed about 70 pounds, and she was just great at this work. However, occasionally a hospital patient would say, "Can she get up in bed with me?" And that was tough. A 70-pound dog with a ill patient is not a great formula. So I started to look around for a small dog. I've never owned a small dog before. There was a woman in Nyack, New York, who ran a pet supply store, and she also was the conduit for dogs, rescue dogs, who had been brought up from the southern states and sometimes Mexico to be rehomed. And I told her I was looking for a small dog, and fine, a couple of weeks later she called and she said, "You better come over here. I think I have something of interest." And I went to her shop, and she had, in fact, 17 dogs that had just been brought up, and they were milling about. And one dog sat pretty still, looked around, sized up the situation, and came to me, jumped up on my lap, and wouldn't leave. That was Paco. So we went home and have lived happily ever after. That was several years ago. Paco has been a therapy dog since 2009, and in that time he has made over 1,600 visits to hospitals, assisted living, schools, libraries, and other facilities. We'll talk about other facilities in a bit. To introduce the subject of therapy dog work kind of requires that we make the distinction between therapy dog work and service dog work, and people are often confused between the two. Service dog work or service dogs are trained extensively for a specific set of issues or challenges. For instance, most popular probably are the guide dogs for the blind. Those dogs are trained for a minimum of 18 months with professional trainers. In fact, I would say it's the highest form of animal training that I know of. Very, very capable animals, many of whom don't get through the whole training because it's so demanding. After being trained, they are given to a person who has that particular need, a blind person, a deaf person, a person who has seizures, et cetera, and the dog has been trained to work with that set of needs. Therapy dogs, on the other hand, are owned by ourselves. We go through training, and their real purpose is to provide comfort, companionship, distraction sometimes. And to become a therapy dog, the animal has to have a nice, sweet temperament, first and foremost. No shyness, no overt shyness, no aggressiveness, definitely. They just have to be nice guys. I might say that the handler owner should be a nice guy or gal also. It certainly helps. We screen dogs several times a year. We screen teams, I should say, several times a year to participate in our classes. The screening is a process in which we determine the dog's temperament, the person's temperament, and the obedience aspect of their relationship. Will the dog do what the person is asking him to do? And I'll just show you a couple of things. So we train with treats. So this is a little treat, but in practice at a hospital or school or whatever it is, no treats. Okay, so there's a treat, and Paco knows it, as you can see. He's paying some good attention. Okay, so Paco, here. Sit. Good boy. Good. Okay. And we're going to ask him to, his least favorite exercise is a down, which means his chest should hit the table. So Paco down. Good boy. Good boy. Okay. And he has to show some ability to not go for something that he really wants if I tell him not to. Okay, so you have seen he really wants this treat, but I'm going to tell him not to until I'm ready for him to have it. And the command we use is leave it. Leave it. Okay, so wait. Leave it. Leave it. Leave it. Leave it. Up. Leave it. Oh, doesn't always work. The other dog handlers in the room are appreciating the trainer not being able to pull it off. But we'll try again. Sit. Leave it. Leave it. Good. Good. And he's paying rapt attention. This is a sirloin steak or something. Yeah. Okay. Good boy. Can't find it. Where is it? simply what we call loose leash walking, which means that we walk from one place to another, and the dog needs to come with us comfortably without veering off too much. So we're just going to Paco, up. Let's go. Hurry. Okay, good. Okay. So why do we do these things? Why do we do this obedience stuff? Any guesses? Yes, sir.
So that the person who is receiving therapy does not have to attend to these other elements of behavior.
Okay, good. It's all about control and giving the impression that you're in control. Just think if you were in a hospital, you're vulnerable, you're kind of anxious, and in walks this person and a dog. And maybe you're not so familiar with dogs. Maybe you're kind of scared of dogs. It's nice to know that the person can control his dog. Okay, it's reassuring to the patient. I'm going to take Paco's. Okay, so that's the obedience side of things, and it gets much more complicated and detailed. But the key is that it's about control. Okay, you and your dog are in sync. You control the dog. You get the dog to do what you want to do, when you want to do it. The other part of this, and as I said earlier, the more important part really is temperament. Will the dog stand up to touching strangers, coming up to it, lots of interaction with people dog doesn't know? So part of our text is to have an assistant to me come up to the dog and just touch him. Just touch him all over. Okay? Like this. Okay? And so let's have Alex come on and touch Paco as though you're a veterinarian. Okay? Good. Good. Just touch him all. Good. Good. And Paco just stands there and takes it. Okay? Now notice that that's great, thanks. When Alex is touching him, I'm touching him too. Okay? Very often a dog will recoil from a stranger if his owner handler isn't there. Okay, so we always talk to the dog and touch the dog and tell him what a good boy he is. So that's one interaction. Another interaction is multiple people touching the dog. Okay, now we get this, for instance, in a school. We walk down the hall of the school and the bell rings and the classes are changing and there are hordes of children coming out and, ooh, look at him, can I touch your dog? Oh, it's so cute, etc., etc. And there can be, like, there's so many hands on the dog, you can't see the dog. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, come on up. And everybody touch the dog at the same time. Just touch him. And Paco's just kind of saying, okay, this is cool.
And it's a little dog.
And he's a little dog.
He's a little tiny dog.
And he really likes Eric's rubbing. Eric's a good rubber, a good singer and good rubber. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, Paco, stay there. Okay, so we screen for that. Once the team has passed the screening, they are then accepted into our workshop or course in which we talk mostly about situations that they might run into in various facilities and what they can expect, and to be ready for the unexpected as well. As mentioned earlier, we go to hospitals, we go to assisted living facilities. You're finding more and more therapy dog teams at airports, at funeral homes, at doctors' offices, et cetera, anywhere that an animal comfort can be exercised, we go there. We are coming here to the Ethical Culture Society Sunday School. Just started, and we're doing a particular program here called R.E.A.D, R.E.A.D, and that is where the children read to the dogs. Okay, so this is the kind of the picture. Suppose that I'm sitting here and Paco is here, and the child is here, and the child reads to us. Okay. Now, if you can imagine, it's certainly a cute picture. You know, it's really quite charming. But it's not just that. It has been proven time and time again that the kids who do the READ program with the dogs increase fluency and comprehension by incredible amounts. I visited at a school in Nanny West, which is in Rockland County, and this is the third year that we've been visiting there. And at the end of last school year, last May, the teacher called me aside. Her name is Liz. And Liz called me aside, and she said, I want to show you something. And she brings out these sheets, these test sheets. And they test the kids' reading fluency and comprehension in September, close to the start of the school year. And then they measure it again at the end of the school year. So 17 kids participated in our program that year, last year, 17 kids. And they do it weekly. We visit them weekly. Okay. The kids who had the READ experience gained in percentage, on average, 22% more than the kids who didn't. And I was shocked, and I said to her, well, Liz, it's not, we just come once a week. You're a darn good teacher. And she said, well, thank you very much, but this means something. It's not just a good teacher, it's a combination of things. So, and that kind of statistic has been proven over and over and over again. For our hospital assisted living type visits, most of the time, the visit is simply a nice, pleasant, perhaps diverting conversation. It's not spectacular. It's just a nice, calm thing to do. But sometimes it's quite dramatic. And I'll tell you a couple of stories of situations that I've gone through that have been quite moving. One of them was up here at New York Presbyterian, which is a psychiatric hospital in Westchester. And I had, with Paco and Dixie, his predecessor, I had been visiting there for several years. One day we came for our visit, and the head nurse at the station that day said, this gal, one of our patients, is not going to join your group today. She's not up to it. but could you speak to her or visit with her individually? Sure, of course. So after our group visit, we went to meet this girl. Now, the background on this young lady, she's 19 years old. She ran away from home at 14. When I met her, she was very depressed appearing. She was wearing a hospital gown, so, cut off at the top, at the shoulder, and I could see her bare arms, and she had clearly tried to harm herself. There's scabs on her arms, and she was a mess. So we sat with her, and I started some conversation, and it just wasn't going well. So I thought, well, and she started petting the dog immediately. She liked that, obviously. But conversation was going nowhere, and so I just let her pet the dog. And we stayed there for about 10 minutes, and then it was time to go, and thanked her, and she was very nice and polite, and she thanked us for coming, and off we went. Next week, we came back, and I was very curious about this young lady and what had happened to her. Where was she going? And the nurse came to greet us, and she was big smile and excited, and she said, well, she went home. She went home. She hasn't been home for 5 years. She went home. And what happened? She said, well, when she met your dog, she was so moved by it, made her miss her dog, and to her dog was home. So she went home. So that was a nice feeling. Another situation happened at Bellevue Hospital, where Dixie and I used to visit. We were visiting pediatrics. And we go up to the unit this one day, and again, the nurse greets us and says, there's this kid. She barely could, this is a nurse, a professional, and she was so moved and distraught by the situation that she barely could describe it to me. But what the situation was, this 4-year-old boy, whose name was Josh, had had a brain tumor. And he had had surgery the week prior. The tumor was found to be benign, but Josh hadn't spoken since. So they feared that they had done what all doctors don't want to do, harm, that they had stopped his ability to speak. Josh had a big bandage on his head, and he was in a crib. He was 4, but they kept him in a crib just for his own protection. So I walk into the room with my dog, and in the room are this nurse, a resident physician, and the kid's father. Okay, in we go, and I know this child isn't going to speak, so I take that responsibility, and I say, "Hi, Josh. Nice to meet you. This is my dog, Dixie." And I start to explain about Dixie and what she does and what she likes to do and where she came from, blah, 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 blah. After about 10 minutes, the kid said, "I'm Josh." He hadn't spoken for a week. "I'm Josh," he said. And everybody's staggered by that. I look at the father, and tears are running down his face. And I keep talking, I'm thinking that, well, maybe that conversation stimulated him. I'll keep going. And few minutes later, he said, I'm 4. I go to school. Want to know what school I go to? And that was it, and the kid kept on talking. So, you know, it's great stuff. As I said at the start, it's not always so dramatic, but anybody who does this for some period of time is going to find some very dramatic stuff. Once in a while, one of the teams that I've trained, one of the people from the team that I've trained calls me after 2 or 3 months and says, George, I don't know if this is working. What's the matter? And she or he says, well, I go to visit and we're going regularly. We go every week. We see these people. And it's just, nothing's happening. The dog is doing this, just laying there. And certainly allowing petting, but it's not much happening. And my answer is always the same. Be assured that when that patient who didn't have much conversation with you and not much interaction, when that patient's husband or wife or child or friend comes to visit that evening, the first thing that patient's going to say is, guess what happened today? A dog came to visit. So it's a diversion. You know, life in a hospital is not great, not fun. And it's a diversion and it's a comfort. So to that point, what we're going to do is divide this group into 3, okay? So we'll just do like a third, and a third, okay? And if, don't do it quite yet, let me explain. We're gonna arrange the chairs in a circle, okay? And you all are going to be hospital patients, okay? And Paco and I, and Sandy and Theo, and Ruth Ann and Chickpea are going to be your therapy dog visitors. And you're just going to have a conversation. The conversation is totally open-ended. You should not expect us necessarily to lead the conversation, but we'll guide things if that's necessary. And you'll see. Okay? So a third, and a third, and I may make one suggestion. If you're with with a husband, wife, close friend, your child, whatever, I suggest you go in different groups. Okay? Okay?